In this video, we are gonna go deeper. We're gonna talk about the movements, the gesture, the behavioral cues that people do when they are being deceptive. It's also important that I tell you right now before you go any further, you have to watch part 1. Otherwise, what you learn in this video will not help you and you will likely misuse it and it will do more harm than good. So stop whatever you're doing now, go find part 1, watch that video, and then come back if you haven't already. What I'm about to present to you is something I'm really proud of because in all of the training, all the reading, all the research that I've done, I haven't found anybody who's categorized all the different types of behaviors in such a simple and elegant way. So I am patting myself on the back a little bit for this. There are more types of behaviors than this, but for our purposes, the main ones that we're about to go over, I think are gonna really serve you well. When we talk about them, I want you to think about how each of these can be used to indicate discomfort. That can be utilized not in just detecting deception, but it can be used when on a date to see if what you're saying is something that they're enjoying or if you should shift topics. If they like the person who's just walked up into the group and wants to join them, whether or not they feel comfortable with you, whether or not they're a good candidate for this job. Understanding when discomfort is showing on the billboard of their body really helps us to know how to navigate, and based on the outcomes that we want from that conversation or interaction, where do we go from there? With all that said, let me start by listing out the names of the categories of the behaviors, and then I'll give you specific examples of each and every one. We have illustrators, emblems or control symbols, I've lumped those together, blocking behaviors, distancing behaviors, ventilators, avoidant or displacement behaviors, modulators, territorial displays, and finally, intent cues. To clarify something that I said earlier, not all these categories are discomfort behaviors. Not all of them are. That's just a list of the overall types of behaviors you'll see in a conversation or when observing another person. Even the behaviors that are discomfort behaviors don't tell us anything unless we look at them through a lens that us body language experts call the 5 C's. And you need to decide right now in your heart, in your soul, and in your mind that you're going to commit these 5 C's to memory because these are going to be your new set of goggles that you wear when examining the world to know what someone is feeling or thinking by watching their body language. Those 5 C's are context, clusters, congruency, culture, and consistency. The first C is context, which means that each behavior is highly dependent on the situation in which they occur. For instance, I may react very differently if I hear an intruder alert while watching a movie, even if it's the same volume and sound, then I'm going to react if I hear that same intruder alert with the same voice and volume if I'm in a public school. Obviously, I'm in America, so that's also a bit of context that matters here. You can expect somebody to be nervous when entering a police interview, whether they're innocent or guilty, because that is the context of the situation. But I'm not going to expect to see those same nervous behaviors when they're just enjoying their coffee at their favorite coffee shop that they go to every Tuesday afternoon. Next is clusters, super important. Because any one behavior doesn't tell us anything. Like I might scratch my face and that doesn't mean anything. But if I see a bunch of different behaviors, like the ones we're gonna go over in a moment, such as pulling my legs back, fiddling with my fingers, making my lips disappear, and now I'm starting to see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 behaviors happening when I asked a question, that cluster is significant to me. Because any one behavior is worth looking deeper into. But a cluster of behaviors starts telling us an entire story. Next is congruence. The body never lies unless it disagrees with the mouth. So if I say, no, I haven't seen him, and I'm nodding my head, that's a lack of congruence. The behavior that I'm doing doesn't match the words coming out of my mouth. It also can be me saying, oh yeah, Jeff, no, I'm really happy for you, while furrowing my brow. So there's a lot of different types of congruence, even timing congruence. And we know that liars, when they are lying, because the big brother is taking over the little brother, shout out to part 1, you'll understand what that means, we're often going to gesture at the wrong time when making a statement. You'll see O.J. Simpson do this when saying, I could not kill her. I couldn't kill anyone.
You didn't kill her?
No, I did not kill anybody. I could not and would not.
He actually hits the table on the wrong point of emphasis. It's a little weird, but that's because he's not thinking with the communication part of his brain. He's thinking with the survival part of his brain. So remember, anytime a behavior doesn't match what they're saying, that's a lack of congruence. That's what we want to pay attention to. The most important one of all is consistency. You can even just forget the word consistency and know that this C is change, because lies don't leak, they wobble. They turn on and off. They don't just consistently spill out. If I ask you a specific question about where you were on Friday night, and the entire time you've been twiddling your thumb, and then you stop and hide your thumbs, most academia is going to say twiddling thumb is a nervous behavior, a discomfort behavior. Well, it doesn't matter what the behavior is that we're looking at. What matters is the change. The change tells us more than any single behavior or what the research tells us that behavior means, because when someone changes something, it happened for a reason. Things don't just change out of nowhere. There is a law of cause and effect. So remember, change trumps everything. And next is culture. It's really hard to memorize all the different behaviors and what you're going to see in one culture versus another. So if you know someone that you're going to be talking to is of a different culture, study up and read, and also maybe immerse yourself in that culture so that you know what behaviors to expect and not expect. A very obvious one is if I'm talking to somebody from Southeast Asia, primarily from India or Pakistan, I may see that when they are saying that they did do something or that they agree with something, they'll bobble their head, which is an agreement gesture. However, in our culture, we know that shaking our head means no. And you may say, oh, that's incongruent. I'm going to pay attention to that. But remember, culture is important. We also talk about how the time it takes somebody to answer a question can be indicative of deception. We'll talk about that in video 3. But in Japan and Finland, it's actually very standard for people to take a long pause before answering a question, because being thoughtful and logical is really valued in those cultures. So remember, these 5 C's are your new goggles to look at all these behaviors that we're covering now. And as I go through and give you examples to show you what they look like, ask yourself, is this a comfort or discomfort behavior? And remember, when dealing with deception, we want to try to notify ourselves when we see a change into a discomfort behavior. We also want to ask ourselves, is this high confidence and low confidence? Low confidence is typically more indicative of deception, especially when that person has not prepared for their lie. We're going to be more likely to see high confidence behaviors when someone has had a lot of time to prep, rehearse, and overall have had the time to think about the lie and how they'll deliver it. And the reason I'm telling you this is you need to understand the context in which you're approaching this person. Is it something that they have an inkling that you may be asking about? Is it something you warned them you're going to talk to them about? Or did you just kind of bring it up out of nowhere? I'm not saying one is better than the other, but you should understand when you're bringing up this conversation about the deception or when the deceptive behavior is going to happen and how much time they've had to consider it. I'm very careful not to repeat myself in these videos, but I want to make it clear that if you're seeing a comfort behavior when you are approaching somebody or questioning them about something that you want to find out if they're being deceptive about, you need to know that that is congruent with them telling the truth. Also, if they're comfortable in a specific context where they should not be comfortable, then that's a red flag. If they're uncomfortable in a situation where they should be comfortable, that's a red flag. So the congruence of it all really matters. The context of it all really matters. Their culture matters, because if we don't understand their culture, then we may misprescribe how important that actual behavior is. And of course, whether or not we see the behavior doesn't matter unless it changes. And when it changes, we pay attention to the moment that it changed and what could have caused that. We also really need to make sure that we're looking for just more than one behavior, because anybody might scratch their nose because it just itches. Anybody might take a deep exhale just because they're tired. But we see a lot of those things start happening all at the same time, and boom, now we know we have someone who's probably being deceptive, or at least very uncomfortable about what we're asking them. All right, I really wanted to make sure I made that clear so you know how to utilize all these behaviors that we're about to cover, because I don't want to tell you exactly every possible situation when it means they are and are not lying. But what I can do is give you access to one of my favorite mentors, Chase Hughes' resource called the Behavioral Table of Elements. It's a table with instructions attached on how to read it with all the behaviors you might see when having a conversation or observing somebody. It'll also tell you the score on the bottom of how likely it is that they're being deceptive and how many points you need of those different numbers to mean that deception is likely. It's a good resource for you to not have to remember all the different behaviors. I still want to cover a big chunk of them, but I'm not going to go through the behavioral table of elements in this video. It is not mine to teach, but I really implore you to go to the description down below, and I'll give you a link to his site where you can download it absolutely for free, even without putting in your email. Just go check it out because it's a great resource. The first category of behaviors I'm going to describe to you that you could start looking for to find out if someone is being deceptive are pacifiers and also adapters. We'll cover them both here. Usually they're synonymous, meaning they are often interchangeable with one another to mean the same thing. But I've separated them because I think that we can put a little bit of nuance here to make it easier to understand why people do the behaviors that they do. So let's look at adapters. In video 1, we talked about all the physiological changes that are going to happen to somebody when they decide that they're going to lie. Whether they want them to happen or not, if it's a high enough stakes situation, it will start to happen. And you can remember that we can question this person in a specific way that makes even a low stakes lie into a high stakes lie because they have to start making that lie into the liar's loop, which we'll talk about in video 3. That puts a lot of pressure on us. Even if I just said, "How are you doing?" and you said, "Good," and I go, "Are you really doing good? Was that an honest answer?" Now I might start seeing discomfort behaviors already just because I've put pressure onto you. So even a low stakes lie can become a higher stakes lie when we pick it apart. And when we go into a higher stakes lie, those physiological reactions like drying of the mouth, drying of the eyes, heart rate increase, flushing of the skin, digestive system shutting down, starts to make our body feel a certain way, and adapters are the direct response to those physiological changes. For instance, as the mucous membranes dry this oily patch in my nose, which we all have, take your finger, if you've never done this, feel the crease of your nose and feel how oily that is. In certain lighting, you can actually see it shining on the person. And when they start to lie, you may notice that shine slowly goes away. You'll actually watch it dry up, shine less, and sometimes even get a little bit flaky and white. Very fascinating. That's the physiological reaction, but the adapter to that might be them scratching their nose. With their mouth getting dry, they might lick their lips. And because their eyes are getting dry, they'll blink more. Think about what you might do when your body is going through those physiological reactions to soothe yourself. Now that brings me to pacifiers. Pacifiers are different because I categorize these as the behaviors that we do to soothe nervous energy. That can be like shaking my leg, wiggling my hands, twiddling my thumbs. I'm trying to release an amount of energy so that I don't feel stuck, still, or threatened by my lie, and so I put that energy elsewhere. These are things like playing with a pen, chewing on a pen cap, playing with my hair. We can rub our legs a little bit to stimulate ourselves, grab our cheek to calm ourselves down, rub our chin to stimulate. Anything that makes us feel good and comfortable is a pacifier. Next, and I know I'm going out of order from how I listed them, are ventilators. Ventilators are adapters with a very specific purpose, which is to cool ourselves off. As our heart rate increases and our blood is moving from around our body into our bigger muscles, which happens without us knowing it as an autonomic response to lying, we will start to get kind of hot around the collar or our neck. We may heat up in our arms so we roll our sleeves off or even fan ourselves off. These are all ventilators. Now, you don't necessarily have to be lying to do a ventilator. Anytime you're cooling yourself off, for instance, a female can flick their hair away from their neck. Boom, that's a ventilator. Unbuttoning their shirt to get some wind, ventilator. Shaking out your clothes to get some air in there like this, that's a ventilator. So any behavior that serves to cool you off and get some air, ventilator. Pacifiers, adapters, and ventilators are all behaviors that we're gonna see more in discomfort. This next category is the only one you're gonna see less when under discomfort. Specifically, when someone's lying, it will decrease dramatically. The research tells us that illustrators, anything that I'm using my hands to make my point to show you or help you visualize what I'm saying. For instance, if I say, look at that big ocean over there, or yeah, my dog's really small. Even me explaining to you about moving something, and I'm moving my hands to demonstrate moving an object. These are all illustrators, and they're usually the thing that we mean when we say gestures. Liars have more focus on watching you to see if you're believing the lie, also on fabricating and keeping the details straight of their lie, and also not wanting to do anything that stands out. They want to be less seen and noticed subconsciously, so they're going to move less. They'll be less expressive and they'll gesture less, and that means that when there's a change all of a sudden and someone stops doing illustrators, even though they talk with their hands all the time, we should perk up and pay attention. The other thing I'll say about illustrators here is that they're a great way to catch incongruence. If someone's not really fully present and their body's not being honest, because remember, we don't control us talking with our hands, it just happens. When we're lying, we have to actively think about it. So if I say, yeah, she was maybe about 6 foot tall, and that's a tall for a woman, but I'm giving a small thing in my hand, the body's gonna be more honest than the words are. So now I can assume that this is quite a short woman that he's talking about, but he doesn't want me to know because the body just gave me the truth when his words did not. Illustrators take priority on what you believe over the words that they say when there's incongruence. Very interesting. I love that detail, and I see it all the time, and now you will too. This next one's not as important in determining a lie, but you can know that they will decrease as well as possibly be more incongruent when someone is being deceptive. And those are emblems. Emblems are anything that in and of themselves are a meaning, a phrase, or a word. Think about flipping someone off. We all know what that means, regardless of the context. If I do this with a heart, we know what that represents. And emblems can also be things that we use in conversations where we're trying to control somebody just purely based on our gesture. If I do this to tell you to stop talking, or I tell you to shush, those are all emblems. You could probably think of 100 different examples of emblems. I'm not going to list them all. There's a ton. Just remember to look for incongruence and also look for a lack of emblems in someone speaking when they typically do use a lot of them. The other discomfort behaviors we're going to talk about are distancing and blocking behaviors, which are similar in their function and reason why we do them, but very different in how they express themselves on our bodies. Blocking behaviors, remember, are used to protect ourselves from a threat that's real or perceived. And you can think of a lie as being exposed to a threat, especially as the person's picking it apart. And so we're going to start to cover our vital organs. We're going to bring in our arms to protect that orbital artery right here, touching our elbows to our body, getting ourselves smaller, maybe rising of the shoulders, which is a discomfort behavior and a lack of confidence behavior. And all these blocking behaviors are low confidence because they mean that I'm in some way experiencing a threat. It could be covering the neck with a hand clasp, which by the way, is a very prominent sign of discomfort. It doesn't always just have to be about our torso and our neck. It could also be covering our genitals. There's something called fig leafing, which is just the polite way of saying the movements that cover our privates. Think about in ancient Roman and Greek times, what we'd cover our private parts with. They were fig leaves, like the statues or drawings that we always see. In men, it's typically going to be cupped hands over the groin. In women, we'll see the same thing, but sometimes we see this, the grabbing of the arm. It protects their breasts, also protects their arteries in their arms, and protects their groin if their hand goes down in between their legs. Now, the full expression of this behavior, or any of these blocking behaviors, isn't the most important. It's when we see the formation of this behavior beginning, and someone might cancel it because they become aware of it. Because if I go to cup my groin because that's what my body's telling me to do, and I realize I'm talking with somebody and I'm not concealed by a table, I may not want to seem perverse or weird or uncomfortable. I'm very likely going to start to go there and then just play it off or change or rest my hands on my lap instead. And so you have to sort of train yourself by watching different videos and having these conversations and practicing when you see fig leafing happen in its full expression, and notice what that looks like as it starts to form and when it cancels. That will just come with experience. Other blocking behaviors. When we don't like something that we're hearing or seeing, we tend to want to block our eyes. This can be closing your eyes for an extended period of time. That's not congruent. Remember, if it doesn't make sense for the context or it's not congruent with what we're talking about, then we should really raise our antennas to start being more receptive to what might be going on. Same thing with blocking our eyes. Because this is very obviously distressed, it's a sign that I'm uncomfortable. I'm probably not going to just do this when you're asking me if I'm lying to you. It'd be quite obvious. So it usually manifests in us touching our eyes. I know this seems like pseudoscience, but it's well researched that touching the eye is a motivator for concealment, just not wanting to experience something. We also could cover our mouth or touch our lips, which we are often told is hushing behaviors, very common in liars or withholding information. If someone knows something that they don't want to tell you, you'll see them touch their lips far more than if they're telling you the full truth. Pay attention to that. You may even see that today in a conversation. Next up, we have intent cues. These are really interesting because they are pre-conscious behaviors that signify what we intend to do. They can be as subtle as the chin jutting forward and pushing as we begin to get ready to attack. It can also be as my chest puffs up as I'm getting ready to throw a punch, or even so much as pulling my fist back to threaten the punch. Some other subtle ones could be me looking towards the door, showing you I have an intent to exit. And I may not even be conscious that I'm displaying that behavior. Checking my watch to show you that I need to go, or pointing my foot towards the door to ready myself to leave. Which I'll tell you, anytime you see somebody doing that, they want to exit the conversation, they're not enjoying your company. And that tells us when it comes to deception, when are we seeing a behavior that shows an intent that they want to leave, exit the conversation, or are getting frustrated with what we're saying? Because that can raise our awareness to go, I need to ask about this more. Or I'm starting to aggravate them, and so maybe I should change my approach. I'll have a list of other intent cues pop up on the screen here so that you can see them. Just keep in mind, does it make sense for the context of the situation, specifically with what we're talking about? And then did it change? Have I been seeing this the whole conversation, or did it happen only when I brought up a specific topic? And then boom, ding, 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 you know where they're being deceptive. A little trick for you. You don't know that they're being deceptive. However, it means deception is more likely. Putting this in here just to correct the record. And finally, we have territorial displays. Territorial displays are what they sound like. It's how we take up our territory. How much am I spreading out? Am I splayed across the couch like a teenager late at night? Or am I sitting like a crowded subway trying to make room for everybody else? Now, these could be courteous behaviors, of course. It's respectful to not show territorial displays when not appropriate. And territorial displays can also be a sign of confidence or low confidence. These territorial displays are such a good indicator on someone's mood and feeling about the situation that they're in that American Airlines staff is trained to deny someone's change of flight if their hands are on their table and elbows are out, giving a territorial display because it means they're more confident and less compliant. They don't want to deal with someone like that. So try to look at whether or not this person is showing you high territorial displays, taking up a lot of space, or low territorial displays, and allow that to inform you how you should move about this, whether you need to be more gentle, more reassuring, or maybe a little bit more stern. It's coming to me now that I should also mention too, territorial displays could also be how you claim things around you. Like putting your arm around your partner is also a territorial display. That just about covers for what we need to know when it comes to deception with territorial displays. It's a better way for us to see how confident someone is in what they're saying. And remember that liars, especially as we're picking apart, should be less confident, taking up less space. Now let's give you some really fun behaviors to look at to see if someone's lying. When someone's low confidence, they tend to shrug smaller, where if they're confident, they'll shrug higher. How can someone be confident if they don't know? Well, it's exactly that. They're confident that they don't know. They're being honest that they don't know. Hey, do you know what the square root of 74 is? No. Do you know where you keep the coffee in your house? No. Low confidence in me not knowing. You'll also see palms up mean I'm being submissive and offering information to you. Palms down mean that I'm telling you something and need you to accept it. Liars are often going to need you to accept what they're saying. So if they do gesture, which is less common for a liar, they're often going to be doing things like this to get you to believe them. They're also going to gesture in the passion zone, which is beneath the chin and right above or around the nipples in this area. Whereas honest people tend to gesture near their hips because they're doing it without paying attention, not for theatrics. So they're not trying to put their gestures and what they're doing in your face. Very important for you to note that. We'll talk about emotions and the face, just real quick crash course on this because it's important for you to know. If you see asymmetry, that is not good. An asymmetry can look like asymmetry in timing. Do both corners of the lips go up at the same time, or are they slightly different, even by just a little bit? Because a true chemical reaction smile, one that's triggered by serotonin, dopamine, and the whole mix that makes us feel happiness, it's going to be automatic, and our lips, right here, that zygomaticus major is going to pull them up at the same exact time. When we're faking it or not being genuine, it's a thought of behavior, and so we're telling our body to move these muscles, and it's not being activated by the chemical reaction. You also can look at when two sides of the face are showing a different emotion. If you look at this mugshot on the screen, you'll see that one side of the face is slightly different than the other, and it doesn't look too off until I cover it, and now you can see one positive and one negative emotion. Because in our culture, we're taught to feign positive emotions like happiness, politeness, agreeableness. We're tending to believe the negative emotion when we see two separate sides of the face showing different emotions, because the negative one has a higher tendency to be truthful because we're not trained and conditioned to show negative emotions on our face. So that would be more likely a leakage of their true feelings. We also could look at whether the emotion flashes off their face or fades off their face. A true neurochemical emotion takes time for that chemical to be released, absorbed, and reuptake process is going to take effect, moving all those chemicals back around, slowly getting that emotion off our face. A fake emotion usually pops up very quickly and then goes away. Think about, hey, how are you? Then when you pass them, smile's gone, because it's not a real smile. Fade is truthful, flash is deceptive. Symmetry is truthful, asymmetry, deceptive. I don't want to go over eye movement with lying too much in this video. There's just so much to go into with transderivational searches and where people go to get personal data versus where they go to get made up data. However, I will tell you to look for eye flutters, which is a processing behavior. It shows an increase in cognitive load. And if we're asking somebody something that should be readily available in their mind, like if they've moved to DC recently, as they've said, and we ask them, well, what day did you move? And we see that fluttering, that processing, the closing of different apps in their minds to access that information. Does it make sense for the context? Is it consistent with how they've been behaving? Is that a congruent behavior for what we've asked? And all these 5 C's that can help us determine whether or not that's a deceptive behavior. The other thing I'll tell you is liars know that they expect us to make good eye contact with them. Otherwise, we feel that they're lying, because we've all heard if you look this way, you're lying. If you look this way, you're telling the truth. And to make sure that they're believed, because liars love facts, but their body does not back it up, they'll look at you to A, see if you're buying what they're saying. They're going to look at you to make sure that they know if you have any doubt or disapproval on your face, and they don't want to give you anything to look back on and say, oh, he must have lied because he didn't pay full attention. Truth tellers actually do tend to look around a lot because they have nothing to fear. Someone who's threatened will overly lock their eyes. So I'll say over avoidance, not good. Too much eye contact, not good. Both of those are red flags. Think of it like a speed signal on a roadway. If you go too far below the speed limit, it's illegal. Go too high over the speed limit, it's illegal. You want them to be just at the right pace, a healthy, fair, and comfortable amount of eye contact without being too intense. The last tip I'll give you is that liars do not like physical contact. It feels very personable and very manipulative if we're lying and we're touching the person. Usually if we're telling the truth, we might pat somebody on the chest carefully or touch their shoulder or lean in and get their attention. Liars tend to avoid physical contact with another person. If you see that in a cluster of other behaviors, that could be another indicator that they're lying to you and not feeling very confident with themselves. Now that you've learned all these discomfort behaviors and ways to determine if someone is feeling confident or unconfident, comfortable or uncomfortable, I want you to look back at those 5 C's and review them once more and try to figure out which one of the behaviors or all of the behaviors that I've covered, when they would be a green flag or a red flag when talking to somebody about something that you just have kind of a weird feeling about whether or not they're being honest. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, video 2, the behaviors that you can expect to see to catch somebody when they're lying. I hope you use this, and I really want you to tell me what your favorite thing that you've learned is down below. Report back in a week or 2 or even a couple of days and tell me which ones you saw. I'm really excited to make this comment section a little community of people who are learning and practicing the skill set all together. And then we'll put up part 3 in hopefully just about a week, and we'll close out this entire series on deception detection, which will make you feel like a human lie detector. Of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. I'm new to YouTube and I'm working so hard on these videos. You can save my life if you just subscribe, if you like the video, if you share it with a friend. Heck, if you can just pull it open on an empty tab and turn the volume off so I can get that watch time up so the algorithm says, hey, this video is good, show it to more people. I'm banking on these videos working because they're so important to me in my career, and I hope that they become important to you. Thank you all so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.